All right, welcome to Controlled Forms. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to control forms in React. So let's talk about the one-way data flow part of this, because it's the only part of this that's challenging. The rest of it is kind of React by the numbers. So I have an input box, let's say. And I want to bind it to some value in state. So this is what the user is seeing. This is the source of truth in the application. How do we bind these two things together? Carl. So that's half of it. We're going to set state.SomeKey just state.SomeKey. We want to bind that to some input, and we do that through what? What is the value we're binding to over here? Yep. So we're saying that the value is this dot state dot some key. Cool, so that's half of it. How do we do the other half? Someone other than Carl. Whenever this input box changes, I need to change state. How do I do that? Set state, so that's going to be part of it. At some point, I'm going to need to do a this.setState. Hey, there we go. So in the onChange for that input, maybe I have a this.update form or something. Something like that. And then what that function is going to do is call a this.setState some key. And then what does it get set to? The value. How do I get the value? There we go. Event.target.value. Cool. So that set state happens. That updates the state. And it's the circle of React. And it rules the side. In the side. Do the whole fucking thing. So when people talk about one-way data flow, this is what they mean. It only goes in one direction. Before this, there was a thing that was really popular called two-way data binding. And so how this worked, it accomplished the exact same thing. That's important. But anytime this changed, we updated this. Anytime this changed, we updated this. But instead of doing this in a circle, they did it directly. They had like little event listeners on both of them that would update one or the other when one of them changed. The problem with that is that it was slower by an order of magnitude than doing it in a circle. It was also like conceptually very difficult. We can draw this in a circle. To this day, I did it for years. I have no fucking clue how the two-way binding thing actually works. There was like a lot of black magic in it. There's very little with this. Cool. So that's kind of our mental model for how controlling a form works. And then when we submit, it's almost identical to how we did that in regular JS. We have an onSubmit, and we attach a function to it. Ta-da! What questions do you have so far? Cool. I'm going to control a form. You're going to watch me. Don't try to follow along. You'll get a chance to do it yourself in a sec. Is that really what I call this project? That was my demo of how quickly you can change the default type. It was 1.5 minutes. I ran out of time towards the end, so that's why I'm using the browser default font. Create React app. Control that form. All right, so I make a create React app. What's the form for? Give me a noun. Roller coaster. Amusement park. All right. Add a new roller coaster to the amusement park.
Or just ride.
Yeah, ride. Like the way he thinks.
Drive.
G's fetch metadata any second now. I still don't know what SIL is. Every time I see it, I go, it's silly. Silly resolve with new module. Silly post CSS selector. So while that's going, I showed my kids the halftime show yesterday, and I made a big deal out of it because I just needed to keep them in one place for a second to turn off the lights. We watched the halftime show. They're pretty into it. And half an hour later, they call me upstairs to see their halftime show. I go upstairs, living room, all the lights are out. They are standing in the window wells behind the curtains, and my oldest goes, "Alexa, resume." And turns on his desk lamp, which he has mounted up high, so it's a spotlight. His little brother explodes out of the curtains in his Link costume, wielding a pool noodle and just swinging it while spinning around in a circle. Duncan has wrapped himself in a makeshift sarong and is dancing the way that a 7-year-old dances. And singing into his walkie-talkie, and he had the other walkie-talkie kind of over by me, so it was like it was a microphone. And then after he's like, "Thank you everybody for coming to our show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the performance tonight, would you please give a thumbs up?" So that happened. Oh, is it still installing? The other thing I did this weekend is I made this 5S cutout for my workbench. Beautiful indeed. It is so clean. In the same like ultimate philosophy that Agile came from, also birthed this. This is called 5S. The S's are Japanese, but they transliterate to like straighten, sort, shine, set in order, and this is sustain. Make it difficult to not do those things. All right, we're live. Okay, control that form. So I've got an empty React app. as is my way with React apps, I just delete all the boilerplate. Bye. Let's get rid of that and all that and that. And let's get rid of the service worker while we're at it. Just a dirt simple app. All right, so npm start. Let's get it started. No. npm start there. Yes. All right, we're on 3003. And over here, let's see if we can smoke test. We already talked about what a smoke test is. Any guesses what a smoke test is? Not a smoke signal. Any other guesses what the metaphor is? Yeah, it means like, is everything wired up correctly? That's what I thought it was. Is like this like airtight container, and is like you fill it up with smoke, and does anything come out? That's not it. Good guess. Has to do with electronics. Correct. Can you plug it in without it catching on fire? Cool. All right, we're wired up. So every single controlled form happens in a stateful component, FYI. So that means I need to make this class component. How do I do that? Let's do this round robin style. Chuck, give me one step. Cool. Podrick, what's next? Okay, cool. John, what you got?
Component and then import that component in React as well.
Okay, so I can bring in component, extends component. Parker, give me another step.
Render.
Beautiful. You guys are getting fast at this. That's what you need to be. Cool. Does it all still work? Well, yes, it does. Awesome. So to control this form, let's make a form. And we're going to give it an input. It is going to be ride. And give it a placeholder of ride and an input type submit value add ride. All right, and they're on the page. Even for a demo like this, I don't want it to look that shitty. So how about I say inputs are display block, have a little bit of padding on them. Ooh, very nice. We'll say that the form has a width of 300 pixels and every input takes up all of it. Beautiful. By the way, you will and have probably already seen this particular issue. The form is this whole thing. Why don't they take up the same amount of space? Anybody know? It's my least favorite thing in CSS.
You need to like reset it to get it to be.
Resetting would fix it. There's one, actually, but here's the funny thing. The Meyer reset doesn't have this, and I can't fathom fucking why. There is something that you need to reset.
Box
Box sizing. What do I need to reset it to? Box sizing, border box. Hey, what do you know? It's fixed. Brief tangent. CSS Box Model. What is the CSS Box Model? Someone's going to ask you this on an interview someday. So, we have the content. Content is width, height. Outside of that, padding. What's outside of that? Good. And then outside of that, margin. Very nice. Collectively referred to as the CSS Box Model. The reason we have to do that is the height and the width don't take into account the padding. We say, I want this to take up 100%, and it does that, and then it also has padding, and so it takes up a little bit more for the padding. When we say box sizing border box, what we're saying is that when we set the width, we want it to be all of this included. So even if it has padding on it, then we want it to include that in our 100% width. I think it's a mistake. I think they should fix the default, but whatever, they haven't. So you're gonna have to do that one of these days. Give a little bit of margin. Awesome. We have a reasonable form now. So let's control it. Our plan was to bind it to state. So if I say state is ride input some string, some empty string, and then I say value is this dot state dot ride input. Cool, we're half done. And I can prove it if I say the bomber. It's my ride. And the bomber shows up there. So half of that circle is complete. The other half of the circle is, you'll notice that I can't type anything in this form because it's hard bound to whatever that value is. This is getting a little long, so let's break it up. And say, all right, on change, I want this dot, we'll make it only handle one input for right now. Update ride input. Then I'm making update ride input up here that takes in an event. And I do this dot set state. Ride input event.target.value. And all of a sudden, I can type in the form. It's the circle of life. It's really that easy. Just control the form. What questions do you have? Yeah?
How does that actually work then? Because if you can't update ride input before doing that target value, like, isn't it like chicken and the egg kind of thing. Like if you can't update it until you are calling the event value, but you can't put a value in there because you can't.
You can put a value in there by hard coding it.
Yeah.
So I'm saying whatever this is, here's why the circle does stop at some point. This represents what the state is at rest. Nothing's changing, we just kind of are what we are right now. And so if I hard code this to something, it sets it, and we stop, and we wait. And we wait for an event which can change this, which resets this, and then we wait. So there's no chicken and egg. Whatever this is like the origin. This is the beginning of it all, is whatever the state is. Get set on that, stop. Explain that back to me, Patrick.
I mean, basically, so when the input field comes directly from state, and so state sets the input field and then pauses, waits for the on-change event to happen, at which point it resets state, and then
Correct.
goes again.
Well done, Patrick. Very nice, very nice. Other questions about how the circle of life works?
Yeah, so just the on change, the input's always sensing the change, but until we actually write that method, it's just ignoring it, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So it's always emitting that, but we don't have a handler for it.
Right.
It was, I'm trying to change. And it's like, shut up, you see? I'm hard bound to the value. Me and the value are an item. Get your grubby mitts off me. Yeah, what's up, Parker?
What's up with the placeholder? Does it really do anything?
Oh, placeholder is, yeah, let's check this out. If I get rid of all that, it says ride.
Yeah.
So you don't have to label it. What else? Yeah, Carl.
Right now, it's, I guess you would call this one-way binding.
Yes.
And then maybe two would just be adding another on-chain or another event listening sort of thing on the state.
Correct. There's no way to do that in React, like for good reason. But in old-timey Angular, that's exactly how it worked.
Okay.
Is you could also listen for changes in the state and then change the input to reflect that.
Okay.
What else?
Is there no way to do that?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think you can React does, so all these events, they look just like DOM events. Like the change event on an input is a DOM event. These aren't actually DOM events because we're not working with the DOM, we're working with the virtual DOM. Thank you. So since we're working with the virtual DOM, these aren't real events. These are what are called synthetic events. So onChange is a synthetic event. As far as I know, there are no events that fire off of the state changing. And really, like because of the way that React works, where basically every state change triggers like a render of the entire app, conceptually, there would be no reason to do something like that.
So if some other, if something else changed some key, would it automatically update that? Okay.
Let's prove it. I like that. Yeah! So we're gonna make a button. And me and the kids have been reading a lot of Alice in Wonderland. So we're gonna add an on click to that. That's this dot set input to drink me. And then we make a set input to drink me. Doesn't take anything in. Technically it's past an event, but we're not going to do anything with it. And then all this is going to do is set write input to drink me. Cool, so when I click that button, updates the state. Changes whatever else I want, sets it right back. Other questions? Yeah, Carl.
Not sure how to plug it in, but can we look at event pooling and notification?
Nope.
Good. That's all.
Other questions about this? Cool. So your turn. I want you to get this far. One input on the page. Don't need to worry about submitting. Don't need to worry about multiple inputs. Don't need to do the drink me thing. Can you get one input controlled on a form? Go. Throw up a hand if you get stuck. Oh no, there's someone in help with my resume at Endeavor Devs who's giving terrible advice.
Crush that.
What's the terrible advice? Yeah.
3 to 4 page resumes if you're senior. Be precise and concise.
Oh, God. That's just like.
Sounds like concise.
Yeah, 3 to 4 pages and be concise. What the hell do you mean?
Yeah.
Which one?
Mark Missy put it well. I don't care how senior you are. I don't care about what you did 15 years ago. Accurate. Cool. It's all about JS.
Okay.
We've done everything in JS so far. That's it. Another couple minutes. All right, give me a fist of 5. Fist is what we're supposed to be doing, and 5 is I have a controlled form. What you got? Okay, cool. So let's review. Get rid of our button stuff. We've got state. We've got a way to update the state. We have a thing that's bound to the state and calls the change. That's the circle. State, bound to input, input change, calls that function, changes state. Any questions come up while you're working on that? How or why this works the way that it does? All right, yeah, Danny.
In your, pictures of your Babel video,
Mhm.
and you click on the property, right, the property to the add change function.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you go back and forth with it?
Sure. So let's extend this a little bit. Let's say there's more than one input that I want to bind to. So I make another one, and it's called category. And we're going to set this to category input. And this is going to be update category input. So then we make an update category input handler. And a property for category input. And awesome. I've got these two things. Both of them are controlled. Now, the problem we run into is what? Why is this like going to scale in kind of a gnarly way?
Every time you add an input, you have to create a new function to update state.
A new function that looks basically identical to all the other ones. Gross. So instead, we could have one called handle change. And what from this, how am I going to do this? Yeah.
You could change category input to whatever you want, put it in brackets, and then set that variable name equal to event.target.name.
Yeah, the way that I set this up isn't super conducive to using the name, but I could do something like make it ride form, and then make that an object, and make these like ride and category. Now they're the same thing as the names. That helps. I just got to update the bindings. So that's ride form ride, and this is ride form category. All right, still bound. That's good. And now these would be set state ride form. This one would just be ride, and this one would be category. Now I have something where I could actually use that name a little bit more directly. Oops. So how can I pull out the duplication? Because this is the only thing that changes between these two, right? And I get that from the name. Okay. Can't put that here though. Why can't I do that? Anybody know? Yeah, because it's looking for a string called event.target.name on the object. Gross.
Yeah, the square bracket.
Square brackets? You mean like that? Actually, shit, does that work?
Yeah.
It should? It shouldn't. So let's see. So now all of these become update category, or update, or handle change. What was that? Yeah, I gotta move it. Good call. So I make both of those use handle change. Holy shit, that should totally not work. Weird. Oh, Damon says something works, all of a sudden it works. That might be weird React shit. The thing I was kind of expecting was like yeah, so you do something like that and do ride form at event.target.name equals event.target.value. And then setting ride form to that. That'll work too. But shoot, learn something new about JavaScript every day. Cool. So now we have a general handler. Don't need all these like special ones. That's pretty cool. What else? Let's talk about this submission. A form, I say on submit, this dot add ride. So I make an add ride. So it takes in the event. So if I want to submit this form, what's thing number one? Prevent that default. Pew, 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 pew. Prevent default. Not on my watch. Two different ways we can do this. So I set up a fetch, localhost 4,000 rides or whatever, and it's a post request, and content type is application JSON, and the body of it is, all right, this is where things get interesting. Two different ways we can do this. One, we can just use the state. Because if the state is bound to what those inputs are, and what we want is what the inputs are, no reason we couldn't just use that. So I can do json.stringify, and I might say, all right, the ride is this dot state dot ride form dot ride, and category is that. That works. How else could I do that? It's the same way we did it in Mod 3. Have you forgot so quickly? We can take in new form data, event.target, pass that in, and then this becomes form data.get ride. Something about me kind of likes this better. This is more reacty. You'll probably see this one more, like 10-to-1, but something about this feels more honest to me. Can't quite put my finger on it. They do the exact same thing though. What else do you want to know?
Do you know if people specify header?
Maybe. It's Monday for everyone.
Fine.
Everyone's a critic. Yeah, your code doesn't work. Okay, one last thing. Let's say I want to componentify this form. That seems like a totally reasonable thing to do. Yep, screwed something else up too. Oh, yeah, probably shouldn't do that. All right, we'll keep the React way. Ride form is assigned a value but never used. Ride form. Happy now? All right. So let's say make a new component for this form. So I touch ride form.js and open that up. I'm going to start by just copying the entire app in. Easy enough. Starts the same. Even has all this ride form business in it. Handle change, yeah, it should be the same. Okay, this add ride though, I kind of don't like having this in this. And so I was just talking with Jesse and Stephanie about this last week, about how a lot of the power from this comes from not having ride form be only ride form. You have a form that looks a certain way, but what that form does, maybe you want that to be variable. So you pass in this handler as a prop, so that the actual thing that gets fetched could be different. So to do that, I need to keep that ride form handler in this app.js. Cool news is that that doesn't need that state anymore. It doesn't need the handle change. Form is going to be ride form now. I can import that in. And what else? Rip out everything but the form. Cool, so that form is like a standalone jobby now. Huh. How do I get that add ride into the ride form component? And I don't have this.state.ride form anymore. Zoinks. What am I going to do?
You can pass that function of add ride down as a prop.
I like that. So let's say add ride equals add ride. All right, it has something that it can call inside that component now. Dope. This.add ride. I like that. What else? It can't see that state still.
You can send it back an object from the other component.
Like that. So Maybe I make something over here called handle submit that takes in an event. And I grab that object there. I can call this dot props dot add ride, or since I'm trying to, the whole point of this, I'm trying to make it general. You just call it add. And I can say this dot props dot add, whatever you gave me, I want to give you an object with ride and category in it. And now this on submit becomes handle submit.
Does it need to reset state at the bottom of that, or?
That's not a bad idea. So after it submits,
Right.
may we do this dot set state. Ride form ride is nothing and category is nothing. Something like that. That'll work. And I can make that its own thing. So we'll just call it reset. And anytime that gets called, it'll reset the form. It's pretty good. App is not defined.
Yeah, export right now.
Ah. Cool. Still bound. Will it make a broken network request? Send it! Oops, refresh the page. We got some inspecting to do. And if you look up at the URL, very curious. Ah, what did I miss? Prevent default. Cool. So, add ride. Prevent default is not you're not a function. Handle submit. That should be there. Is that the thing that's getting called? I do. And also, this is part of it. So now this is a ride. And maybe we destructure out ride and category from ride. That makes that a little bit cleaner. So we're passing in add ride as add to this form. That's add, giving it that object. Prevent default. On submit, handle submit. Looks good to me. Oops. Come on, Coverly. Oh yeah, that doesn't help. We'll call that ride data. All right. Network error. Good. Should. It's not real. This dot add ride. Cool. So when this thing fails out, made the request to 4000/rides, And oops, yeah, it's going to fail the pre-flight. This is an options request, but it made the request. And that's how it do. Hit me with some questions. Controlled forms. State finds the input, we listen for change, update state. We can make that more general by having that set state abstracted out into like a handle change, where you're just looking for the name. As long as your name is the same as what you're calling it in state, not a big deal. Otherwise, you could even map between them. Then lastly, if we're trying to do this through components, we're just passing in props. The number one place that I see students mess this up is in like our form component. Everything you pass to onSubmit or onChange or whatever has to be a function, just like JavaScript. You add like add event listener. You can't just pass a value or make a statement like set state or something directly in that. It has to be a function. Even if all the function does is wrap up like a single statement like this, doesn't matter. Can't inline it. Or if we wanted to inline, I don't know, some behavior. Like if I put that whole handle change thing, you put that on one line. I was like, I'm going to be a clever boy, very, very clever boy. And I'll put this in here like that. Doesn't work because it's a statement. It needs to be a function. So you'll see something like that pattern every once in a while. So it has to be a function. Yeah, Miriam.
If you did that syntax,
Mhm.
where you declared an empty function or a non-function, if that function needed a parameter passed in, could you just put it in that?
So say I did that. Like this one in particular, takes event. Just works like that. And if any of you remember like my functional rant from mod 3, if it needed 3 parameters, and if that hurt your head, don't worry about it. That's how we would pass in multiple parameters to something like that. Gross. Well, it's not crazy about you either. Cool. What else? More questions? Yeah, John.
Go over this .props.add. So we're adding props to like send it back up. Is that what's happening there?
Yeah. So this handle submit. This is kind of like a way station. All it's doing is preventing that form behavior and then calling this function that it got passed with its state. It doesn't actually do that much. It just kind of cleans things up a little bit. So I can also do this.props.add in a function inlined in the thing instead of having this, but since we're doing like 3 different things in this, sort of makes sense to make it its own function. Yeah, this.props.add was just this add ride function. But I can call it from inside ride form. The function call is calling from inside the component. What else? Nope, it's not magic. I just called it add, so it's going to be called add inside the ride form component, and I can call it whatever I want outside of that. Anything else? Yeah, Danny.
There's something you mentioned a couple times. I don't know what it was that you were teaching, but you kept like saying it over and over again. And then finally, one of the students was like, "Oh, it's just this." And we're like, "What the fuck?" What's that in reference to? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah,
I know, lesson I taught 5 months ago. What was it?
It was about a promise, and someone finally got what it was.
Promisers or eventual data.
Oh, yeah. A promise represents an eventual value. Every time I say that, somebody gets like 10% closer to like actually believing that. It's really not that crazy. A promise represents an eventual value. So if I do something like my ride is fetch rides.com/ride1 or whatever. The problem is that this is a network request. It's going to take a second. I'm going to stop the application. So my ride doesn't represent my actual ride. It represents this promise which will eventually be my ride. So I do something like my ride, and whenever I get it, then I have my actual ride, and then I can do whatever I want with that. A promise represents an eventual value. The craziest thing about that is that you can also do static values. And then return them out of promises, and then they come back as promises. Because if a promise represents an eventual value, a constant value will also eventually still be that value. A promise represents an eventual value. It's one of the weirder, more abstract things that we go into some depth on in the program. Nobody gets it the first time. Most people don't get it the 10th time. But one of these days, you will get it, and you'll never be able to forget it. Because it's simpler than you're making it. That's the challenge. You're always overcomplicating this in your head. One day you'll let go of it and go, oh, Jesus, that's all it is? That's the nature of promises. Anything else? Thank you.